Pretty sure a bunch of people looked at that title and went, okay, Spoon's either been hitting the breakfast whiskey again or he's clickbaiting people for the sake of the funnies. Why not both? You know, I don't think I've ever told anyone this before, but I am no fan of politics. As a matter of fact, I think I might hate politics, which kind of a strange thing to admit for someone who does political commentary on this platform, but anyway, I really don't like a fair amount of people, and the politicization of damn near everything has made me dislike a lot more people more than I already do. And it's not nice to look at most people with scorn and ill contempt. It's fun, don't get me wrong, but after a while you get weird thoughts. Ever see the beginning of 300? Yeah, basically that. But the reason I say all of this is because in the wake of the frying pan to the Democratic dome that took place a couple of weeks ago, woo, and the subsequent put in the woke away bet going on between Orrin and academic agent, it's sort of fascinating and quite frankly a bit disturbing as well, to be quite honest, to see the extent of the machine's coding capacity, if I can call it that. And what I mean by that is the potential for the classic media machine, you know, corporate conglomerates, the for-profit media entities that shape the narrative, or at least trying to anyway, to get their scripted updates and pivot back towards sanity, versus the more so-called progressive or independent leftists who pride themselves on not being part of the machinery, allegedly, who perhaps will not pivot and even double down, even though they're basically the same thing. Like I said before, the only thing that separates the two is funding in the studio. The difference is only aesthetic, really. And this is where things get kind of interesting. We can look at a recent example of this. Joe and Mika from MSNBC went down to Mar-a-Lago, apparently, to speak to President Trump. And for this, they were rather derided as ones who kiss the ring of one they've been calling some kind of fascist dictator for, more than half a decade at this point. And how dare they do this? It looks like they have no conviction. My word, it's almost like they're just actors only playing politics. Duh. Well, that MSNBC is maybe being sold off, and now they need to prove they can keep an audience without remote control being thrown at their faces. Now, naturally, this is the media. We trust virtually no one on television. Bollocks to all of that. However, meeting with the president is an objectively sane thing to do. Doubling down on everything you did in 2024, changing nothing and not learning a damn thing in the wake of a quaking defeat is a rather insane thing to do. Now, I said a few moments ago, the difference between the two media spheres is largely aesthetic and has appeared that way up until now. No pun intended, of course. So now what we're going to see is, can the machine steer itself towards sanity versus the more true believers, who are in complete denial and will continue to spiral off into the abyss of insanity? And I, for one, welcome the left being permanently infected with a class of deranged morons who think they are never wrong about anything. Oh, but speaking of politicization, watch this clip from Piers Morgan. His show basically brings on what you can call peak midwifery, very much within the Overton window. You know, for a show called Uncensored, it really doesn't live up to its name. Totally unremarkable people, at least when it comes to the left anyway. Then again, I did say progressives can only be stupid in my last video. I stand by that statement, by the way, and I'll show you why. So listen to Brian Tyler Cohen here talk about Nancy Mace, who is a congresswoman. Now, she took issue with some recent rainbow hippie member being elected to Congress, which is fair enough if you're a female, let's be honest.
Yeah, I think it puts on full display the extent to which he and the vast majority of Republicans aren't actually in this for legitimate reasons. They're just doing it to stoke panic about trans people because they recognize that as a culture war issue, it benefits them.
You see, this is what I mean by the politicization is toxic and produces a horde of morons. Given that you support democracy, Brian, well, at least in name only anyway, and would no doubt shriek like someone wired calipers to your knackers if I mention any other form of government to you, let me explain to you how this works. As theorized, the politicians are supposed to be a vessel for the will of the people. Does it ever occur to you then that this is the system working as intended? This is not a culture war issue. No, it's a government issue made by you twats the moment you force parents to deal with this after you pushed it into the school system. The moment you mess with people's children and upset the parents, that is when you will face wrath and backlash. In fact, if you were to strip this issue away from virtue signaling and regime propaganda, no one sane wants a civilization with a growing class of humans who believe themselves to be the opposite sex. It makes no sense whatsoever. It's bizarre to me that you talk about this benefiting them. What do you gain by pushing this issue? Hell, the only reason why that recently elected bloody politician is even known is because they're part of the Rainbow Hippie Coalition. It's a publicity stunt. Does their identity in any capacity help them pass better legislation? No. So it's a luxury gimmick, like every other stupid thing you plebs advocate for. You're the one pushing this issue purely for the sake of power and moral posturing, because were I to adopt an anthropological perspective and look at this particular demographic, they offer absolutely nothing useful to civilization. They're entirely superfluous. Were one to hypothetically remove the demographic and or ideology, nothing bad would happen. We would face zero catastrophic consequences. The same can't be said for traditional gender norms, however. You need them or else the civilization dies.
Look, going back to Nancy Mace, she explains on a weekly basis how she was the victim of sexual assault, including in this very previous segment with you. And yet, and to that point, I feel for her, and I think that's absolutely also awful. But she also breathlessly supports somebody like Donald Trump, who is an adjudicated rapist and who was credibly accused of sexual assault by 26 different women.
Oh, please keep pushing that issue. Please keep demonizing the man that just won all three parts of government and the popular vote. Let's see how well that works out for you. Credibly accused by who? And when? Because when it's only after he descended the golden escalator, it turns out that trying to Kavanaugh every man seeking a position of power has diminishing returns. Shocker.
So the cognitive dissonance at play here, first of all, is incredible.
Oh, I concur. Although probably not for the same reason.
But second of all, just with regard to Nancy Mace, with regard to Donald Trump, we know why they're doing this.
Yeah, you said why just a few moments ago. It's a winning issue. Does it ever occur to you that if the majority of a civilization does not want something, then it is in the interest of those seeking power to carry out the democratic will of the majority? Again, I do not understand this obsession with simping for any minority that would in no way hurt your civilization if they departed, especially when it's off-putting to a larger section of the electorate. Coalition building I can understand, but this is objectively insane. You're actively alienating the majority of people as you jones for power like a junkie. Standing by your conviction and never apologizing is fine if you are right, which is why I never do it. But in this case, you look like a schizophrenic.
Nancy Mace is not afraid of Sarah McBride chasing her into the bathroom. She's not. She wants to fundraise off this. She wants to be social media famous. She wants to be... Nancy Mace has more ambition to be famous online than every single member of Jersey Shore.
Doesn't mean she's wrong.
Indeed, you can both desire fame and do something objectively good in the world, especially if, as you just said, the issue is a winning one. I think if you were to ask these plebs, why do you think this issue resonates with so many people and do not use the phrase discrimination or bigotry? I don't actually think they would have an answer. I think they would just start screaming violently. The fact that they think that only applies to them would lead me to believe they think anything conservatives do is done purely out of self-serving malice, and they see the right as only evil. Now what would one do against a faction that considers you reprehensible? The mind boggles. Can you imagine if I debated him? Man, there is no way in hell it would ever make it to air. Given my line of questioning and political affiliation, I'm pretty sure his cries would break the sound barrier. Also, call me cynical, but I swear Piers only does this show to make himself look better.
It means that she's doing this to help herself, and she's not actually concerned about this issue.
Yeah, but Brian, come on. Look, hang on, Brian. A politician doing something to help themselves. If that was a criteria for why we shouldn't listen to them, we'd never have anybody to interview.
True. Not only that, but the entire system of politics would not exist. You're removing personal incentives. Hell, the only way you could have a political system like that is if you remove your politicians and replace them with machines.
I prefer the term autocrat.
I, for one, would welcome our AI overlords. The rest of it is him waffling on about it being political. There's never any contact with whether or not anything he stands for is objectively good for a society, because he's just in it for the power and the accolades. He doesn't ever think about any of this. That much is obvious. But anyway, the person I really wanted to discuss, though, is Kyle Kulinski, because his TDS derangement right now is up there with Sam Harris. Now, David Pakman, for example, he's doubling down unabated as well. But he just has one mode of operation, smug bastard, and he has no emotion either, he's just a drone. Whereas Kulinski has left the mothership and is now drifting off in outer space somewhere, deprived of oxygen, reason, who the hell knows. He legit seems to have gone completely insane, and I am totally here for it. I hope he becomes a Democratic advisor, I really do, because he has learned absolutely jack shit from all of this. It's fantastic, proving the left still can't meme with stuff like this. Congrats, Dillweed, you now have EDS as well as TDS. Well done indeed. I'd like to see him try and explain fighting a class war without involving the state. It should be funny.
Let's have a little chat with you before we get reaction from the panel, but...
My word, look at the state of this. The earring, the necklace, the frosted hair. It's like he walked into Queer Eye for the Straight Guy and said, I'm a LARPing discount Backstreet Boy, now turn me into a metrosexual chav who deals yayo.
Why did the Democrats blow it so badly, and what do they do to avoid this happening again in 4 years?
Have you considered not running a corpse or something with a personality that makes you wish you were one?
I mean, the simple answer is that Kamala Harris kind of codes as a technocratic status quo manager, and Trump codes as a change agent.
Yeah, so far so good. So let's see how rapidly you fuck this up.
And so, I mean, to sum it up as simply as possible, voters just thought he's going to deliver more change, she's more of the same, and they broke for him.
Okay, now, would you care to tell us what exactly is the change they think Trump will provide? Come on now, this is terribly vague and lacking more details than Harris without a freaking teleprompter.
Who would you like to see run the party now? I mean, what's the future of the Democrats looking like to you?
Dead and buried.
Jon Stewart. I've been pushing that since the day Trump won this time around, because what we need is
an elitist, washed up, out-of-touch comedian, well past his prime, who knows nothing at all about surviving in high-stress environments and dealing with foreign cultures. Why?
I was wrong. Will continue to be wrong.
You know what, on second thought, why on earth did I think Carl would pick a competent figure? I'm starting to see why you chose him.
Honestly, a controversial, charismatic celebrity.
Jon Stewart isn't any of that. He came back and swallowed all of the leftist garbage and went right along with the current zeitgeist. Last time Jon Stewart was remotely relevant, George W. Bush was still riding high after dodging a shoe.
Might make all of the difference, but it's that mixed with Bernie Sanders' policies of actually delivering social democracy for people, raising their pay, getting them health care.
State intervention and yet more state intervention. This moment right here is why one of my next videos will be called How to Frame Break a Liberal and or Leftist. Well, they're basically the same thing. Liberal is to leftism what socialism is to communism. Liberalism is leftism for slow people. Only in this example, leftists are slower because you get more brain damage the further into leftism you go. But I'll expand on something I said in the last video. These progressive types, you know, the Cedars, the Pacmans, the Kulinskis, you're all either soulless psychopathic sellouts or some combination of naive, gullible morons. You have to be. Given that the state holds a monopoly on violence, the one function it's supposed to perform is defense, and it can't even do that. Or refuses to, rather. The American government is a bloated, sloth-like behemoth of unabated corruption. How on earth you can have a class of dimwits, then, who never examine the structures of government, the incentives thereof, or just the immoral standard of man the system attracts, and yet all of their solutions involve granting the state even more power, which is fucking mind-blowing to me.
That is such a good point, isn't it?
Thank you, V. But it's true. Every time I see this mindless suggestion, I have this reaction.
I literally cannot comprehend this perspective.
Man, I have gotten so much mileage out of that clip. It's so good, though. But there's something David Starkey said some time ago, how each class has traits and values that they admire. The working class values charisma and strength. The aristocracy values titles, lineage, and achievements. But the middle class belongs to neither. And so the only virtue they can distinguish themselves with is moral or intellectual superiority. Not that Carl has an intellectual superiority, mind you. He's a wannabe elitist larping as one who cares for the working man, yet he was stumped by seeing farmland. Now, these wankers are no aristocrats, but they are rich enough to afford ignoring the reality that large amounts of basic functions in the American government apparatus are misfiring, and apparently stupid or gullible enough to keep advocating it has more power. You can't look at a society where the political figures are bought and paid for, propped up by the merchant class, with no physical repercussions occurring outside of the peasantry flicking a lever once every 2 years, and still remain stumped as to why politicians have the reputations they do. If you can't add 2 and 2 together here, you're an imbecile. So please keep doubling down.
I think that's the magic stew, and honestly, I think it's a shame that more people aren't talking about the controversial, charismatic celebrity portion of Trump being so successful, is that you can't keep the cameras off him. He's entertaining. Love him or hate him, you can't stop watching him.
Okay, let me just shatter your worldview here for a moment, boy larping as a Ken doll. The reason why Trump has that charisma and entertainment value is primarily because of genetics. That's not teachable. You either have it or you don't. And that's just who Trump is. Trump is authentically that. And having billions of dollars of fuck you money doesn't exactly hurt him either. The policies complement Trump's quintessential American persona. Leftism doesn't have those complementary policies because leftism is a cancer.
But I would add to that what Bill Maher's been warning for a long time to liberals, speaking as a liberal himself.
Bill Maher is not a liberal. He has his nose up their asses as he cheers on the destruction of the English capital as progress. He is an evil wanker.
I'm pretty much where he is politically, I think. I feel the same way. And I know you've been keen to say, look, Kamala didn't mention any of these woke issues or whatever, but she's very much associated with a lot of those woke issues.
True, she was literally promoted as the DEI vice president by the very administration she was serving in, as you can see here.
She's certainly voted in line with a lot of the more progressive stuff, like allowing transgender athletes in women's sport and so on.
You're considered the most liberal United States senator.
Somebody said that, and it actually was Mike Pence on the debate stage. But
yeah, well, actually, the nonpartisan GovTrack has rated you as the most liberal senator.
You know, if you're someone who happens to hold derogatory opinions about the opposite sex and their capability when it comes to the political arena, I imagine 2024 is a year that cements the realization that you were completely right in those assessments.
So she's seen to be a progressive who then moved rapidly to the center when she got the nomination, and it was all too much of a screech for people, probably on both sides. But this whole woke ideology, I don't mean the original woke ideology of raising awareness for racial and social injustice.
Oh no, I was always aware of those. Just the moment I tried to explain why those so-called injustices exist, that is when I tend to cause some trouble.
In a way, it's become a kind of new form of fascism, where the far left just basically want to cancel, shame, and humiliate absolutely anybody who disagrees with them about anything.
True. Is Carl going to admit to that? No, that would be an admittance of wrongdoing, and they are never going to do that.
Do you accept that has become a problem, a stick to beat the party with, which actually really damages them electorally?
No.
Told you. But let's watch him double down and see how much of this I can dispel.
I think Kamala ran basically the platonic ideal of a non-woke Democratic campaign.
Oh, fuck!
She never mentioned race. She never mentioned gender.
She didn't need to. She had Obama for that.
She never mentioned trans people. She never mentioned pronouns.
Even though hers was in her ex-bio prior, and it got dropped the moment the virtue signaling currency no longer carried any weight. Much like AOC did.
Or Latinx or cancel culture. She repeatedly stressed that she was going to represent all Americans.
That's a promise full of more shit than your election predictions were, mate.
She ran to the right on the issue of the border.
After she was the one in charge of it and allowed the influx of record-breaking illegals flooding the United States.
She talked about owning a gun. She ran on freedom and patriotism. And so when you put all that stuff together...
You're still stuck with a woman of color when people are sick of incompetent people who look like her, who have no business being in any positions of authority they're in, with no personality, who couldn't talk without a freaking teleprompter in her damn face, and who couldn't tell you how she is any different than the current administration. Anyone who says this campaign wasn't a train wreck dumpster fire is an idiot, who you should fully encourage to keep talking as much as humanly possible.
I simply don't know what people are talking about when they say she's
Well, they're talking about her record.
Those things at
well,
all.
hang on. They're talking about her record as vice president of the Biden administration, where they never stopped talking about this stuff for nearly 4 years. So you could pretend when you get the nomination, whoa, I'm a centrist and I'm a gun-toting Rambo, by the way, as well, to all you Second Amendment people. But actually, if you judge her on what she said and did, in 4 years, she was a progressive left person. And to pretend otherwise is to just ignore what went on in that period.
Man, you know when Piers is making you look stupid, you're really far gone. What he just said isn't even all that illuminating either, it's but observable reality.
What I'm much more concerned about is not Democrats being woke or Democrats censoring speech. I'm much more concerned about Trump's record on those things.
The conversation is about why Kamala Harris lost. And notice, he ignored all of what Piers just said and is now pivoting to Trump, which is fantastic. Please keep talking badly about the person who just whooped your little pet project.
So, for example, Trump said he wants to punish flag burning with a year in jail. That's against the First Amendment. He sued CNN for $475 million.
Nobody cares.
For calling election denialism the big lie. Before he was president, he sued Bill Maher for $5 million over a joke.
You know, in an age where America is funding 2 wars, the border is porous, crime is out of freaking control, and the inflation is burning people's money faster than whiskey does mine, what is this bleached up eel over here talking about? Oh, Trump once sued Bill Maher. No one gives a flying fuck, you dipping gecko. And I wish I count my blessings, voices like this can tank the Democrats into irrelevancy, but it genuinely pisses me off that someone this dim has thousands of people listening to him, acting as a feedback loop of mental mercury. He's not the brightest bulb around by any means, which means you can effectively qualify his audience as broken.
It seems to me another problem, and he does this brilliantly, by the way, with the left. He sucks you in. because he just shoots from the hip and he says stuff that crosses his mind or whatever. And rather than pick him off on stuff he actually does, you all go completely nuts every time he opens his mouth and says something a bit crazy. And if I was advising the Democrats, I'd be like, stop doing this. You're literally playing into his trap every time you do this. Just pick him off on the stuff he actually does. Then you got a better chance.
All right, I'll do that. Here, ready? He gag ordered the EPA from telling the truth on climate change.
Ah, yes, that load of bollocks that gullible slow ones believe need to be fought by giving the state more money. Man, I'm really running out of ways to call people stupid. I really don't like calling everyone who disagrees with me dumb, but come on. If you think the entire system is corrupt to the core, but sending in some politically wet beyond ears amateurs is somehow going to make a dent in machinery stuff with people who've been around since JFK still had his head, you need to examine yours.
He arrested and charged 6 journalists with felony rioting.
Oh, he did that, did he? How? By the way, this was during Trump's inauguration. Maybe that's why people aren't talking about it, because it happened almost 8 fucking years ago. If you know anything about the news cycle, and it's quite clear you don't, people's attention spans don't last for 8 days, let alone 8 bloody years. And as you can tell, therefore, the charges were dropped. I want to say in less than a week. 2 of them are still outstanding. Maybe find out why.
He did not pardon Assange. He did not pardon Snowden. He did not pardon Daniel Hale.
And you happen to know the circumstances or consequences to him if he did this, do you? Or do you just enjoy being a pompous, posturing git as you sit there pretentiously pontificating on matters involving details you are in no way privy to? I'm not trying to defend it, by the way. I don't like the decision either. The difference is I'm not arrogant enough to think a president is going to act purely on behalf of my moral code. That seems insane to me.
He wanted to invoke the Insurrection Act to deploy the U.S. to deploy our own troops against George Floyd protesters.
Those were rioters, not protesters, jackass. I'm starting to see why you lost, actually.
These are all things that are actually on the record, things he actually did. And the thing that I find incredibly frustrating is that nobody talks about it.
Yeah, because employing military force to crush the destruction of private property is a rational use of state power, you fucking idiot.
And I just think that ultimately, if the Democrats are going to try and make themselves electable, they've got to move wholesale on now to a far more effective way of campaigning. And it can't just be every time Donald Trump speaks, mass hysteria, shaving your head, going on TikTok and posting videos of yourself screaming and saying you'll never have sex with a Trump supporter again. All this stuff is insane.
How about just telling the truth? Wait. How about just telling the truth?
Well, seeing as you never do that, I don't think it's within your capacity to actually tell the truth. However, seeing as I always tell the truth, allow me to elaborate. Anyone who engaged in the post-election behavior that Piers just mentioned there is embarrassingly childish and mentally unfit to engage in politics in any capacity whatsoever. And it's totally a coincidence that most of them don't have a Y chromosome, but anyway. Whereas you, well, you've officially joined the ranks as one of the most disconnected political lunatics on this platform.
And the fact of the matter is Trump attacks Democrats 4 times as hard as they attack him.
Yeah.
So if anything, the lesson to take away is the opposite. Democrats should get more arrogant, they should get more aggressive, and they should tell the truth more.
Even Piers is laughing at that absurdity. The party of McGovernment must solve the problem of seasons, and we can't define women suggesting they need to tell the truth more. You need to start first, never mind more, except you can't because only right-wingers tell the truth. Their entire worldview revolves around ignoring reality and screaming labels at anyone who points it out. But they need to get more arrogant and more aggressive, after they just lost every part of government. Do tell what the hell actually merits you to be aggressive and arrogant. Something you will notice about these lunatics, there's no focus on any policy. Even when discussing Trump, the appeal of Trump in their mind is only ever on the entertainment or the controversy. Their only analysis during this whole cycle is the marketing pitch. Their sole focus is on the brand. Nobody cares about the brand when the product is horse shit, you idiots. Think of it like this. Society is run top down. What is cool always trickles down. It's projected down from the top. When everything is going well and the basics are squared and taken care of, you can afford to care about the frivolous and the superfluous. However, when the basic needs aren't being met, those who can still afford to care about the utterly unnecessary end up looking like pretentious twats. Or hell, if those issues end up doing damage and you still persist on pushing them, you look like a malicious, pretentious twat. Or a delusional one. Or maybe both, who the hell knows. The reality is the MAGA phenomenon has effectively ended the Obama era, and now the Democrats are stuck in the political wilderness. They have no leaders, no policies, and they have no idea why they lost. Hell, most of them are in denial they even did anything wrong. Will they learn anything? Well, let's hope not. Cheers for watching, and once again, I apologize for nothing.